Good morning and welcome to Press Pass Live, your weekly podcast show for the OMFL. Thank you so much for tuning in. I am your host, the commissioner, the founder of the Grown Folks Online Community, commissioner of the OMFL, and we are excited that you're here. And as always, I got my buddy with me, D. Wayne, my sick buddy, though he's not feeling well this morning. That's payback for kicking my ass every time we play. D. Wayne, welcome to the show. I'm sorry you're down and out, buddy, but thanks for hanging in there with us anyway.
Oh, man, it could be a lot worse. I'm glad to be here today. It's still a good day outside. And, yeah, man, just ready to get this show going.
Yep, I am too. So let's just jump right into it now. We've got a couple games left. Or actually, I said a couple games. I think we only have one game left. So let's just look at weeks 9 and 10. Just give me your best games from week 9 and your best game from week 10. Which one stuck out to you? Let's talk about some of these.
Well, like I said, week 9 had a couple good games. Some different games, some matchups you don't usually see. One matchup that really stuck out to me that I thought was a good matchup, and we talked about it last week, was the and I'll let you cover. There's one more that I think you're going to jump on. But I'll cover the Packers and Browns. I thought was an interesting matchup. We talked about it last week that we thought it would be an intriguing matchup. We thought that, Chaotix and the Browns would come in and maybe throw Priest off his game a little bit with, how defensive heavy the Browns are. And I think, as the score says, Packers won 24-13. Priest got the better of Chaotix on this day, and a lot of it to do with the 6 turnovers that the Browns had. It's very uncharacteristic of Chaotix to turn the ball over like that. Usually he plays such hard-nosed defense, and he just doesn't kill himself. But he did today. And the Packers came out and made a statement. A 24-13 game, scoring 24 points against the Chaotix Browns is nothing to scoff at. If you look at the stats from this game, the passing yards to the Browns, it looks real good, 305 yards passing, but he threw 5 interceptions. Yeah. And that was just what killed him on this day. You're talking about turning the ball over 6 times compared to 2. And, we always talk about Priest, but Priest usually, he shoots himself in the foot with his turnovers. This day, he was on the opposite end of that spectrum. But the Browns had uncharacteristically just vaunted offensive day, 300 yards passing, 100 yards rushing. He was 44% on third down. But the penalty, the turnovers were just his undoing. The Packers didn't have to do nothing special. He made it really easy on Priest. Priest had 133 yards passing, 50 yards rushing. It was only 20% on third down. Chaotix did everything that he needed to do to win this game except throwing it right to the green team. And, you got to look at a couple individual stats. You got Duckett at 312 yards on pretty much 50% passing, but the 5 turnovers just sucked. McCutcheon and Baker both had 46, 48 yards rushing. Really not bad averages either. He was running the ball pretty solid. Williams had 105 yards receiving. Strong had 85. You look at Chaotix's defense, always plays solid. Peppers and Green, 2 of the best, I guess you say, secondary players in the AFC, both come away with an interception. But the Packers just dominated this on the defensive side of the ball today, and you usually can't say that about Priest. Priest usually wants to outgun guys, but no stats offensively stuck out for him. McKnight and Good, both 51 yards combined on 20 carries. Nothing that really sticks out to you. Rodgers, less than 50% passing, 140 yards passing with a touchdown and 2 picks. Benson and Jones, a combined 109 yards. Or 119 yards, but defensively is where he just got it. You got Clinton Dix, Thompson, King, McMillan, Randall, all with the interception. You had Thompson with the sack, Griffin with the sack, a forced fumble. The defense for the Packers just really showed up today in a game that I thought Chaotix would really come out and just put the defensive hammer down to Priest, because I thought he would just bait Priest into beating him through the air and making him turn the ball over. And we look at it, the Packers did the exact opposite to the Browns on this day.
Yep, I think that you hit all the points, right? Like, if Chaotix doesn't turn the ball over 5 times, the Packers maybe score less than 10 points, right? And the Browns come away with the victory. He seems to have found his rushing game finally. He's starting to, he's not putting up massive numbers, but there's some consistency between those 2 running backs. He clearly has the defense to win in this league, but he cannot continue to turn the ball over. I know he messaged me the other day. He's pretty frustrated. He feels like the game itself was out to get him. We've all had those games, or for some of us, those seasons where it just feels like everything is out to get you and you can't do anything right. And Chaotic very much feels like he's having one of those seasons. I want to talk about the Giants and the Eagles. The Giants come away with a 37-34 victory in a really big bout between two very, very good teams. Really and truly, this game was not about the defense. Both of these teams had the opposite defense. So the Eagles allowed 447 passing yards, only 52 rushing yards. So they did the job when it came to stopping the run, but gave up tons of passing yards. On the other side of the ball, the Giants gave up 209 rushing yards, only 201 passing yards. So both of those teams were having success in the opposite realms on offense. 3 turnovers for the Giants, 3 takeaways for the Eagles. You look at the sack numbers where the Eagles usually are super superb. I mean, they're in the top 5 usually of the league, top 3 a lot of times, but they only had 1 on the day. 75% third down percentage for the Giants, only 56. I say only, even 56 is superb. 56% for the Eagles. Cam Newton, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception, 4 touchdowns, 2 interceptions for Winston. Bell tug for the Giants, having a good season, just not getting the ball enough. Only 9 carries, but 41 yards on those carries. Gordon on the other side, 14 for 177 and a touchdown. Really put up a lot of yards. Foster, even for the Eagles, seemed to be the only guy that could get his hands on the ball. 5 receptions for 144. But, man, look at Odell Beckham and Ingram. 11 for 238, 3 touchdowns. 7 for Ingram for 114. Odell Beckham is having a hell of a season. Matthew over there for the Eagles, 2 interceptions and a forced fumble, really doing it big. But some way, somehow, with all these turnovers, even with all the passing yards and rushing yards, like the stats would tell you that the Eagles actually did the better job here. But I know this game came down to like the last drive, last field goal attempt, and the Giants come away with the victory 37-34. So a really big victory for them. Let's move over to week number 10. I think we've only got 1 game left. I know it shows 2, but one of these games is going to be a simulated game. The other game will be this afternoon. Was there any of these games that kind of stuck out to you as a game that we needed to talk about?
Well, in week 10, there was quite a few games that come off the books as solid games, even from teams that, aren't necessarily still fighting for playoff spot per se. I know it's early in the season to say that, but some teams that showed some life this week that showed some, that they're still willing to compete. But one game that really stuck out to me, and just for a reason that it was a big game for both teams on different spectrums, was the Chargers and Giants game. I mean, you got the Chargers are fighting for their playoff lives over there in the AFC West. And then you have the Giants, who just came off a huge win against the Eagles, and you said last week, have been playing great all season. The only loss they had was you beating them early in the season.
CPU if you look at this game,
right? You're talking about he's had an impressive season so far, and honestly, I don't think he came in overlooking Dawson, but I think he comes off such a high off the Eagles win. I think he was coasting a little bit in this game. And I think it showed a little bit. I think if you look at this game, it's a low-scoring game compared to the game before, which falls right into Dawson's, his strength is playing this low-scoring defensive game. If you look at the stats, and I guess there's 2 stats that tell me, which one of them is turnovers, which that's always a telling story. When the Chargers have 0 turnovers to 3 with the Giants in a 3-point game, that tells you a lot of what you need to know. But what gets me is the 219 yards rushing by the Chargers. That's just unheard of against a Peppers-led Giants team. That's just ridiculous. Yeah, the Chargers have 160 yards passing, 219 yards rushing, only 33% from third down. But like I said, the turnover differential was in their favor. If you go over the Giants after having such an explosion last week passing, they have 122 yards passing, 80 yards rushing, and 29% on third down. I mean, you take away the turnovers here, honestly, 3 turnovers in a 3-point game, Pepper wins this one, even with all the stats in Dawson's favor. I mean, you look at Dobbs, with 66% passing for 172 yards and a touchdown. You had Franklin, who just unleashed for 21 carries, 170 yards, and your ex-Saint Kamara, 7 attempts for 50 yards. I mean, anytime you run like that, as a guy who loves to run the ball, if you can control the tempo of the game, and a 17-point game, in my theory, that's a good score. Just because you're controlling the game, and like I said, when you have 219 yards, you're controlling the tempo, you're controlling the momentum. You're not letting Pepper get into a rhythm with Beckham over there. You keep going down. You have Mike Williams with 60 yards, receiving Henry with 48, Dorsett, which is a very underrated receiver over there in the San Diego, or I guess LA, with 39 yards. And then you just look at Jenkins, Ellis with the interception, T.J. Watt, who's been a big pickup for the Chargers this season with another sack. And then you jump over to the Giants, and Winston just did not have a good game. 45% passing, 128 yards, a touchdown, 2 picks. Derrick Henry and I think it's Beltongue. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Just never really got off the ground. I think if you take away that 25-yard run off he's got 5 carries for 25 yards. In my opinion, you got to give him the ball a little bit more. I know Henry, he likes to run Henry, but Henry's averaging 2 yards a carry this game. At some point, you got to give the other guy, just let him run the ball. And what really got me is Beckham with 3 catches and 24 yards. Anybody that can hold Beckham like that, you got to count that's a win. If not anything else, a moral win to hold Beckham like that. I couldn't tell you right offhand if that was his lowest output of the season, but yes, it is. By like 40 yards, it's the lowest output all season. And I think that just speaks in volumes of Dawson's defense playing real well this week, because he knew who he had to stop. But I do think a lot of it is the Giants just came, they always talk about you play that big game, you have a letdown the next week, and I think this is a good example of it. I think he did have a letdown. I think he kind of came in coasting, and no matter what record the Chargers have, you can't coast into and play Dawson and expect to come away with a win.
Yeah, I think that outside of the Winston game here, it's almost the exact same, except especially on defense of his other games, right? He's just allowing too many rushing yards. It's 219 total rushing yards or something like that, right? Like, he's just allowing too many rushing yards. He's doing a great job in the pass defense against everyone he faces. But when you turn the ball over the way he's been doing the last couple of weeks, against the Eagles 3, here 3, right? And you're allowing all those rushing yards, you're going to be playing from behind. You're going to have to pass the ball a lot. And Winston struggled 9 of 20. You spoke about Odell Beckham. Like, all of these struggles are going to add up unless you kind of get that under control. And I feel like he's doing a lot of same things I'm doing with his running back. Beltongue has 6 for 53. Last game he had like 9 for 50 or whatever that was, right? Like, I think the stats are starting to tell you who your better running back is.
Right.
And just like me, like, I spent a lot of money with the Chargers trading for a running back. He's doing nothing for me. My backup rookie, who's rated much lower, is actually having a much better season. Like, sooner or later, you just got to, like, start the guy who's earned it, right? No matter what you've paid, no matter what you're paying, no matter overalls, you have to start the guy who's, like, earning the job. And I think for the Giants to find that balance, they need to give this kid the start. He needs to get 12 to 17 carries a game. Slow Winston down a little bit, let him make some better throws. With that defense, it's going to turn into a winning strategy for the New York Giants. I just quickly want to hit on the Broncos and Chiefs. It just speaks to those teams, like you were saying, who are probably out of that playoff run. Both of these teams are sitting at 3-6, but yet they're still competing. The Denver Broncos come away with a 21-17 victory. The Broncos have slowly started to put the pieces back together after his team just got old quickly. He allowed 316 passing yards, but only 39 rushing yards. Only 233 passing yards on the Chiefs defense allowed, 52 rushing yards, 3 sacks for the Broncos, 2 for the Kansas City Chiefs. And then you look at the offensive red zone percentage numbers, right? Only 56% for the Chiefs, 75 for the Denver Broncos. Both of these defenses seem to be playing really, really good football. Both had a couple of turnovers, but somehow the Denver Broncos get just enough plays to make this a winning strategy. 14 of 24 for 242 for Waters with the Broncos. Mahomes, who's really kind of struggled a little bit this season, had a pretty good game. 17 of 24, 330, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. It just was a lack of running game from both of these teams. McCaffrey probably had the best game, 12 of 43, but nothing really to speak of for the Kansas City Chiefs, and none of the backups for the Denver Broncos did anything. Nixon with a really good game, 6 for 136. I think that's his rookie who's just tearing it up this year. Tavon Austin shows he still has it, 8 for 147. Even Conley's playing pretty well, 5 for 117 with a touchdown. Over on defense, Ragland has a sack. Peters has an interception, even though he's kind of getting up there in age. Barrett with a sack and a forced fumble. Harris Jr. with an interception. A couple other guys with some sacks there for the Denver Broncos. So overall, really good game for them. Tight AFC battle that just went down to the wire. The Denver Broncos escape with a 21-17 victory. So that's a look at your Week 9 and Week 10 games. Advance will be a little later tonight. We'll get to it, and it should be normal as always. Like, guys just get a lot of games in on that first day, and who knows, man. We are getting through these seasons left and right here. I kind of want to turn the corner here, though, and talk about the Minnesota Vikings. They're sitting at 7-1-1. Not too many ties that we see here in the OMFL. I'd say there's probably been less than 10 in our entire 19-year history, and there just hasn't been many of them at all. But the Minnesota Vikings had one this year. Now, the Vikings used to be over here with you and I, with the Tampa Bay Bucks. I actually still miss them being there, even though Tanner in Tampa Bay has just picked up the ball where Bill left it. But just made for a really great division with Colin. But Tanner, again, there's been no slack. Tanner's made it a great division. He's a great ball player. But Bill went over to Minnesota and has really put it all together, man, and been owning this division for a while. Now, I still think that the Green Bay Packers have an opportunity. They seem to be having a really good season. They're putting some things together to make a run. I still think that if Detroit could ever have more focus, that he would put a run here. Right. And then Chicago just has a lot going on. He had a little bit of a run last year, but has struggled this year out of the gate. And really, this is, if Priest doesn't do something here soon, this is going to be all about the Minnesota Vikings. The issue has been when they get into the playoffs. He hasn't been able to make that really deep run. I still think that he has the skills to go all the way to an OMFL Bowl. So my question to you is what is going to be different about this team this year as he sits at 7-1-1, and what is it going to take for him to make that run and actually compete with the Dwaynes and the Moes of the Seahawks and be able to get himself into either an NFC championship game or an OMFL Bowl to represent the NFC?
Last season, he upset me in the playoffs, but then he just ran into the Mo factor. I think everybody runs into the Mo factor in the playoffs. I think his biggest thing this year is his defense has played so well, and I think you have to have defense to win the playoffs. If you look at, he's first in defensive points per game and first in rushing yards per game. I'm a big firm believer is you got to stop the other guys rushing. We were just talking about Pepper, back-to-back weeks giving up 150, 200 yards rushing. And I ain't gonna lie to you, man, there's no worse feeling than getting ran over like that. And I know you said that before that,
it's infuriating.
It's right. You call the right defense, you do everything right, and guys just run on you. And it just sets a precedent for the whole game if you get ran on like that. And I think
not to get us off topic, but you're the best at it. And Mo is one of the best. No matter what you do, it's you guys just know how to run, and it's just these gaping holes, and it's it kills your soul. It really, really does.
Well, I think, like you just said, it does. If you're getting ran on like that, just breaks your defense down. And it almost makes you commit more guys into the box. And then you got somebody not necessarily like me, but you got some guys here that will make you pay if you load the box on them. And I think Bill's got that. He makes guys, he shuts down their run. He's actually 11th in passing defense. So his and I'll go back to that, right? That'll be my next point, is that his team has 28 interceptions on the season, and that's just ridiculous through 9 games. And he's talking about almost a little over 3 interceptions a game his defense is giving him. And I think that's a huge, huge factor. And especially when you look at he's only turned the ball over 9 times this year. So he's got a 28-9 turnover ratio that's in his favor. And I think that, that just says a lot. He doesn't give you opportunities to have the short field. He doesn't help you out and, give you easy drives. And in retrospect, his defense is putting him in position to play real well. and to get easier points. And I think that's a lot of his offensive statistic, lacking on that side is he does play the short field a lot. But if I had one knock on him, though, he's got to find a running game.
Yeah.
He's 30th in the running, in the rushing department. He's only averaging 61 yards a game. He's got Joey Kemp averaging 3.1 yards a carry. That's his number one back. Pumphrey Jr. is averaging 4 yards a carry, but he gets about a little over a third of what Kemp gets. If that's me, I would have to give Pumphrey a chance to carry the load a game or two and just see if he can carry the load. That's the only thing I can see holding him back in the playoffs is you got to be able to run the ball. I always said that before that, you have, and I know that Mo and Cincy have kind of made that not look as good, but I always used to say it when you've seen Ducks in the playoffs or you've seen Maniac in the playoffs, you've seen guys that just played hardcore, just real good defense, and you run the ball and you control the game. You don't give the other team a chance to turn the tide if you're running the ball well and playing good defense. I think that's what Bill's recipe is. And then you look down here, he's got Stephon Diggs, who, in my opinion, and I know we have some great receivers in this league, is one of the best receivers in this league. He's almost unguardable when he's on. And then you have Obi and Sprinkle, Montgomery. He has weapons on that team that can be really, just scary. Look at Obi. If he could catch the ball, he's got 12 drops on the season with 33 catches. That's a big deal. And I think he's just got so many weapons that it's really hard to focus on who you're going to stop. And that's why it kind of puzzles me why his running game isn't any better, because somebody like me, when I play him, I really try to focus on Diggs. I think I spotlight Diggs every play, and he still has over 100 yards. But I can't quite figure out why his running game, isn't any better than it is. We just go down and touch his defense just a little bit. He has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 guys with multiple interceptions. You have Xavier Rhodes with 6, Harrison Smith, who's just an aging wonder with 5 picks. Culver, I think that's his name, with 5 picks. You got Hunter, who is just a pass rush specialist with 16 sacks. And if I'm not mistaken, I watched him last game. If I'm not mistaken, almost all 5 sacks he had last game. And I know that's a ridiculous number. Were all computer sacks. Was just his secondary just blanketed the secondary, made Massimo and Dallas hold the ball a little too long, and Hunter just got back in the backfield every time and just wreaked havoc. And I think that's kind of, we always talk about Mo's defense, how Mo's secondary is so good that he buys his guys up front time to get to the quarterback. And I think Bill and his Vikings are right there at that. I think he has one of the top probably 3 secondaries in this league. And I just think that his defense in general, how he stops the run, how his secondary is well enough that you can't pass once your run doesn't pick up. He makes you turn the ball over, and he doesn't turn the ball over a lot himself. If he can figure out a running game, I think he's right there with Mo as a favorite coming out of the NFC.
Yep, I think you hit all the points about this team. I don't want to reiterate everything that you just said. I think he has the defense. Clearly, that's his MO. He's got the quarterback who's playing really, really well. And he's got Stephon Diggs. Now, there's not a lot after Stephon Diggs. Now, Obi is having a pretty good season. Sprinkle's having a pretty decent season. 7 touchdowns for Obi, only 2 for Diggs. So that's a little bit of a concern. But, hey, however they have to combo that, man, Diggs is having a hell of a year. Here's my 2 concerns about this team. Number 1, injury. Stephon Diggs is out for 5 weeks, and one of his top offensive linemen in Sturgis is out for 4 weeks. So those injuries are really going to hurt him, because we're going to know a lot about this team as next advance is the Seattle Seahawks, and I think in 3 advances is the Cincinnati Bengals. We're going to learn a whole lot about that team in those 2 games, and that sucks that he's not going to be able to go into those games fully healthy with all of his weapons. Now, Hunter is having a great season. With this quarterback play and this defense and the year that Diggs is having, you really have all of what you need to be able to win. Just find a little bit more of a rushing game. He's not having a terrible season rushing. Look, he's averaging 61 yards a game. He's 30th, all right? That's pretty terrible. But if you look at the individual stats of 361 and 188, I've seen much worse because they belong to me on my team, all right? So he's got something to work with. He's got the offensive line. He just needs to put it all together. Find some rushing game, though, and then this team can take the next step. But I am super intrigued. By the time we do another Press Pass Live, we'll know what they've done against the Seattle Seahawks, which is going to be a massive game. And will either be right at Cincinnati or he may have gotten that game in by the next time we do a Press Pass Live. So it'll be super interesting to see exactly what's going to happen to this team, because I think they have a lot of potential. Their conference, their division, I should say, is almost completely over. They just about have that thing wrapped up. So we'll just have to see exactly what happens to the rest of this team. Let's kind of turn the bar a little bit, because we are at a very interesting part of our season. I'd have to say this season, more than others, we have a lot of teams who are pretty much out of it. And so my question to you is, out of the Lions, the Colts, the Ravens, the Patriots, and the Bears, they are having a race for the number one pick. Who do you think is going to get that number one pick, and what do you think that they need to do with that number one pick to make it count?
I honestly think it's a two-man race. I think that the Colts and Lions are just right there bearing for it, because I hate to say, just like a fish out of water, they've just been flopping this whole season. And that's not just knock on the player itself. I think sometimes, especially after you start out 0-4, 0-5, that mentality starts to where you're out of the race. And I'm not saying they don't try as hard, but I don't think they try as hard. But I think you got two unique situations. I think DBL's going through a lot right now.
Yeah.
I think the Colts, I think it's Jimmy, it's kind of the MIA, just kind of hit and miss. And this is the league where you kind of, I know some owners do a real good job at buying. They play and they communicate enough to stay, relevant within the league itself. But, as I found out, it pays off real well if you stay engaged.
Yeah.
And play, and
it
really
he's
does
not.
pay off.
Look, let's just call it what it is. He's just not engaged at all.
Right, and I think that goes a long way. If I had to go between both of them, I think it's the Colts and the Panthers are going for it. And if you look at the Colts team, they're not very good really anywhere. But offensively, they're literally at the bottom end of every offensive statistic. And you don't have bad players. You have Gurley, you have Wentz.
Yeah.
You have Michael Thomas, you have Martin Wade, you have Moncrief, you have Willie Snead. You have some solid players in that team. A lot of his problem is he's just not engaged. That's the biggest thing with him. He has players, and I know that's a tough division to come into. The Colts are. You have the Jags, you have the Titans, you have the Texans. Three teams who are well established, and like I said, have two owners that have been there since I've been here. Have been that same division, if I'm not mistaken. And the Texans, really up until this season, were a dominant team too, and had that. I know they're 6-2 this season, but had the same owner as a carryover. I think Detroit, though, will come out with the number one pick, and I say that because I just think that the NFC in general, I don't see DBL and the Lions winning the game. On his schedule on the way out, he's got the 49ers, he's got the Bears, and I can tell you, Outlaw, if he don't want to win any game all season, he'll want to win that game. I think he's got the Giants, he's got the Vikings, the Packers, Steelers. That Ravens game at the end could be his chance to get a win.
That's a tough schedule.
It is, and I think that's his one chance is the Ravens at the very end of the season. And but the Ravens have showed some life, and I think the Ravens, I think they're going to play their season to win some games. I don't think they're going to tank, and so honestly, I don't think he wins that one either. If you look yesterday, before the DC that they had, he was losing pretty bad to the Seahawks, which most of us this season have lost bad to the Seahawks. So that's not knocking DBL either. Now his computer team, which says a lot, gave him a really valiant effort and should have won that game yesterday. But if you look at his team as another example of he's 31st in rushing, 31st in scoring, but he does have some bright spots on his team. And I know that's odd that I'm picking him to be my number one pick. I just think he's playing in a lot tougher side. I think he's got like every team, excluding Outlaw and the Ravens, are playoff teams. And like I said, Outlaw will play that game like a playoff game. But his pass is 13th. His total yardage on offense is 18th. His rushing on defense is 9th. I think he's got some bright spots.
Yeah.
I would like to see him either. He's got to get a playmaker on offense. I think he's got a young quarterback who's fast development eds. He's got a solid running back. I think it's McNary, who's a star development 24. I think he's got to get him. He got to give him a good receiver, or he's got to get something on offense that he can do it. And I think we all know DBL is way better than that record says. I played him all last Madden with the Panthers, and he was always one of the toughest games to play when he's engaged. And I think he's got to get some spark. I think he's got to get an offensive spark. If it's not he needs to get a game changer receiver, especially you see somebody like the Broncos, the Seahawks, the Bengals who have picked up receivers. And I know that's a far reach depending on your playing style, but if he can get a game changing receiver, like kind of like he did last year with Benjamin when he played for the Panthers, when he was engaged, Benjamin was unstoppable. I think that DBL needs to pick him up a game changer on offense, and I don't think he's far off because he has a solid defense already. He was always a really good defensive coach. I think he's just one offensive star away from, like I said, not necessarily going in for that division, but becoming a team that guys have to watch out for.
Yep. I think that this is going to come down to the Bears, the Lions, and the Colts. I'll hit each one of those really quickly individually. The Ravens, Mackey is a amazing dude. I am massive fan of Mackey. He's in our wrestling. I love the guy. So we just need a handful more of those guys. Super engaged, super into it. Just like he's all in, and I love that about him. He's going to figure out how to win. When you're that engaged, when you're that plugged in, you'll figure out how to win in this league. The Patriots, Santa, had some real-life things, had to step back for a minute. He messaged me. He's going to be back. He's a player. He knows how to win. He's going to pick up a couple more wins this season. I don't think that he'll tank. I think he'll pick up 2 or 3 more wins before the season's over with. Right. Have a high pick, be able to put that team together. The Bears, the Lions, both have real-life stuff going on, and they're both amazing dudes. 00 has been with me for almost all 19 years. He's my buddy. We've met in real life. He's my guy. I think that the Lions have the best team out of those 3. I disagree about the receiver thing. Could he use another? Yes, but I think he has that playmaker in the rookie that he had last year. I do agree with you. I think he's got the quarterback. I think he needs a better running back, but it sounds like he might have one with the superstar Devo. He just needs to put a little more work into him. I think where his focus needs to go is offensive line. He's got playmakers at linebacker, at cornerback, maybe some DBs he could draft, maybe some defensive linemen, definitely offensive linemen. Those are the 3 areas I think of need. That team, with his engagement, like if life could give him a breather and he could be engaged a little bit more and focus a little bit more, I think that 0-9 could easily turn into 5-4 pretty quickly, 6-3. I think that he's got a really good team, and he has the most potential to really push Bill in the Minnesota Vikings. Bears the same, but I think that his life situation is going to take over for the rest of this Madden until next Madden, and hopefully he'll be able to hang in with us, and we'll be able to figure that out together. I don't see that team getting better. I just see that team getting worse because of his real-life stuff that's going to disengage him. The Colts are my biggest worry. I like Jimmy as a person, but I don't really know him. He doesn't talk. He's never in chat. I never see content. He just gets his games in. And he's 0-8. And when you're disengaged from the community and you don't really talk to anybody and no one really knows you and your team starts losing every single game and you're getting blown out left and right, it's usually only a matter of time before you deuce out on us. It just is, right? You can't lose that much and be that disengaged before it's like, this isn't fun. Because the fun part of a losing season is that you're engaged with your team, you're producing content, you're talking to guys, you're trying to make your team better. But if you're not doing any of that and you're losing, then this just becomes a job. And this sucks as a job, and you'll do. So, look, I hope he continues to engage. I know that you personally have worked with him. I've tried to talk to him a little bit. But, at some point, a guy's just got to be willing to put in the work and make stuff happen. So I think that the Colts are going to be the one who actually walks away with this, with the Bears getting the second one and the Lions coming in with that 3rd overall pick, because I think the Lions have the best team. Let's talk about rookies. We were talking about the draft. Let's go and look at some rookies. My question to you is, who do you feel what rookie has had the most impact on his team? Not the best season per se, but who has had the most impact on his team this season?
Oh, that's tough. I mean, you look at a couple guys. You got Alan Decker from Cincinnati, who stepped into a role on a team that was already built to win, and he's undefeated through his rookie year already. He was a 2nd-round pick. You're talking about a guy with 20 touchdowns to 10 interceptions, 123 passer rating. Then you step down and look at Pittsburgh. They got a quarterback who they picked him out earlier. They picked him out to pick overall. Not quite having as flashy of a season, but 14 touchdowns, 13 picks, a 90 QB rating. It's not a bad rookie season. And he's kept, if I'm not mistaken, he clicked back here. He's kept the Steelers relevant. I mean, like I said, the Steelers are 6-3 this season, and he's kept the Steelers in a playoff race. Then you got easy choice is Dak Cole with Seattle, just because of the gaudy numbers he's put up, and then Nixon to Denver, which hasn't translated into the wins as much, but has one of the craziest, just a freak Megatron-like person I've ever seen. I've watched a few games from him, and when Glaze does become engaged and gets everything, figured out, that guy's going to be really scary, even scarier than he is now. One guy that really stuck out to me, there's really two of them, but I'll go with one of them. You got Briston from Tennessee and Glover from Green Bay. I think that these defensive, you got Glover as a left end and Briston's a left outside linebacker, are two guys to me who just stick out for the reason as sorry, my hamster wheels were going slow.
You're good.
Briston from Tennessee really sticks out to me just for the fact he was 16th pick of the draft. He's a right outside linebacker. He's your typical outside linebacker for a 3-4 defense. He's quick. He's strong. He'll knock your helmet off. He's got 12 sacks through the season. He's got one defensive touchdown on the season. I think he's a catalyst for the Tennessee defense. I think he really comes again. If you look on the game logs, the games that he plays well, his team wins. San Francisco, Tennessee upset San Francisco. He has 2 sacks. They beat the Jets, who everybody knows the Jets and Modelli are a solid team. Has 3 sacks, they win the game. Has 2 sacks against Arizona, they win the game. He had 3 sacks, they barely lost to Jacksonville, and he had 2 sacks against Denver in an upset that honestly you covered earlier, talking about Glaze winning that game. I think he's been a big step if we're looking just a little outside the box, because like I said, it was really easy to pick either those 2 receivers or pick Decker. Just for the fact I think Dacko and Decker walked into just winning situations to where I think, honestly, I don't think the teams are much different without them on that team.
Totally agree.
That's just in my opinion. And I think that Nixon, if Denver could have had a little bit better record, I think he's the only thing that's actually kept them relevant this year. I think I want to go with Briston with Tennessee. I think he's just a game changer. I think, we've talked about that before. I don't know if he's user. I don't know. I couldn't tell you right offhand. But somebody like that can get in the backfield. Me personally, I hate, a 3-4 defense is scary just because you don't know where that fourth rusher is coming from. You got 4 different gaps that guy can come from. And I think that, he's really played this rookie to his maximum potential. He got 12 sacks through like 9 games this season. He'll probably close in the late teens, if not a 20-21 sack season. And that's nothing to scoff at. That's really good. And I think he's been a catalyst for that Tennessee defense, and a team that we've talked about for a long time now is kind of underachieved in our eyes. Yeah. And even I think Jason would say that. He always tells me that. He said, y'all still believe in me even though I let y'all down. But I think he's in a tough division for one, and I do think that he's got a guy on defense now that's going to propel him, and I think this could be his year to make a good run.
Yeah, I think Dimmons would be an interesting conversation because I think he's definitely one that has to be considered as the biggest impact for his team. But when you talk about Decker, right, that team was already winning before him with another quarterback. Right. It just was plug and play. Same could be same for Franklin, like the Chargers have already had a really great running back and great running game. Again, I think it's just plug and play. Same with Dacko. I can't even consider Dacko because the other guy was doing the exact same numbers. He just now has a new target. Nixon is one that you have to think about, but just hasn't translated to enough wins. I think you also have to think about Ziegler with the New York Giants. I know that you talked about his other guy in Haywood. Like, he's another guy that you got to talk about the Giants. And then, of course, you went with with Glover with the Green Bay Packers. I actually want to go the other way and talk about Marcus McMillan. I think because you're talking about a team that went really old and that it just was floundering, and then somehow has put all these pieces together. He drafts this middle linebacker in the 5th round, 8th overall pick. And the guy's already worth an early fourth-round pick according to Daddy Leagues. 87 speed, 86 acceleration. I mean, just look at these stats that this kid has put up. Now, you got to ignore the other stats, just happens to have the same name. But 27 tackles, which is number 2 in the league for rookies, 2 sacks, 3 forced fumbles, 5 interceptions, which is top 5 in the league, and 2 touchdowns for a 5th-round pick. I mean, that is just
crazy.
Outstanding. And I think that this guy's had that big impact for this team. He's kind of anchored down the middle for this defense, which has settled things down for them and is translated to helping them win some games. 8 tackles in his opening week, 4 tackles against Cleveland the other day, 2 interceptions against Detroit. I mean, he's just getting after the ball. He's making plays. And this guy is going to be considered for Defensive Rookie of the Year. I do like Marcus McMillan as the guy who's had the most impact for his team so far this season. Yeah, and that is it. That's a look at our league up to week number 10. Advance will be tonight. Let's get over to some owner-submitted questions. It's been a while since we've been able to do these. Mo submitted 2. One we're not going to talk about, just plain and simple, Mo, because we have no clue. We're going to get as many as we think that we can get in, and it really just depends on the owner, so that's a tough one. Everybody's asking that. I don't know. Make the best decision you can when we get to that point for imports. Don't worry about it until it needs to be worried about. But let's look at this first one from your personal team. Would you sacrifice winning now for going after more import player chances? For example, trading away an absolute stud player at this point of the cycle for draft picks to give yourself more odds of landing a potential import. What do you think about that, Dwayne?
I could not do it. I could not trade away my immediate success for an import player. I understand the theory behind it, and I can understand the team that's maybe 0-4, 0-5, 1-5 for the trade deadline to think that they need to trade a superstar guy off or somebody that, if they feel like they're out of contention already, to go ahead and trade him off and get a pick, and maybe you can have a better chance of getting a stud in the draft. But me personally, and if my team is in any kind of playoff contention at all, I just can't do it. I can't do it. I couldn't trade wins off. And I don't know if that's what he's meaning, if he's meaning like, at the first of the season, just abandoning the season, or if he's talking about halfway through the season, you don't think you're going to compete, so you just trade off. 2 different theories on that one. That's complete tanking to being a realist. But I personally couldn't do it. I feel like my first round pick that I'll have this year, I'll have a good chance of getting a solid guy, which I feel like some guys probably have higher expectations for their import. Nate, I remember, when I brought my import over this time, you kind of double asked me because my import was not a flashy guy.
It was not.
And he turned out to be a solid player, which it took, some guys just like more immediate success, and he just fit what I wanted to bring. But I can understand both sides of it. But me personally, I couldn't do it. Which I never could. If I was 2-10, I couldn't throw games away, even though that'd probably be the smart thing to do, is to play for the future. I couldn't do it. But that just me. I could not trade away a star player if I'm a contending team, for a better chance of getting a better a better import player.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. The Detroit Lions, I know, went through this where they were thinking about trading away a stud. My point to that is you're trading away a known commodity for an unknown commodity. You're worrying about a game and a team that doesn't come out for a very long time. The game may play completely different. Your team may look completely different. The real NFL team that you're going to make some moves, and you may actually have different needs in 4 months whenever the new game drops. Like, there's just too many unknowns. Now, at the same time, if you're the Seattle Seahawks, right, and you're just like really great at everything you do and you can win no matter who you have, then like you have a flexibility that no one else has. If you're the Detroit Lions, hell no, you can't do that. You gotta hold on to your known commodities for as long as you possibly can. Those are 2 different teams with 2 different outlooks. I think it depends on each one. In my opinion, you worry about imports when it's time to worry about imports. I don't look at draft ages and all that stuff. Like, it all works itself out, and you spend so much energy and time and emotions worrying about things that, in my opinion, just won't matter when the new game drops. Even if you swing and miss on your import player, it's not going to make or break your team in Madden 19. You need to let Madden 19 worry about itself. So I would not take that strategy. And as you can see here, Mo has a massive signature because he dude keeps winning absolutely everything. Let's talk about Kylo. Jason, he says, the other day, Nate mentioned an idea of managing teams losing their team if their team had consecutive losing seasons. What do you think about doing that for real? I'd propose upping the ante. What if any owner that comes in last place in their division for 2 consecutive seasons gets regulated to the deuce a la Premier League? And so my idea was, I've always played with the idea of, if you had multiple losing seasons, let's say 3 losing seasons, so below 500 in all 3, it had to be all 3. And other teams also had the same thing. So let's say it had to be at least 2 teams in the league who fit those qualifications. All those teams who hit that qualification of 3 losing seasons consecutively in a row would have to give up their team and take one of the other teams that are open. So if there were 4 of them, 5 of them, 3 of them, all 3 would have to swap teams and come up with a swap. It's just been an idea, right, to make guys invest more into their team, make smarter decisions. And if you've had 3 losing consecutive seasons, then look, go try another team. Try your hand at it. Here's why I've never done it, because a lot of guys here have their favorite team, right? And take 00 in his Lions, right? He lives in Detroit. He's a passionate fan. If real life comes at him, he has 3 losing consecutive seasons. I make him take some team that he's not invested in. What's keeping that guy here? We lose a good owner. It hurts us overall as a league. So it's just been an idea. What do you think about Jason's idea of upping the ante and playing with that?
I think it's a touchy situation for one. I think, you look at certain circumstances, I'll use the example of if you were in the NFC West right now, you got 2 teams in that division. And this is not talking about the other 2 guys, but you got 2 guys in the division, the 49ers and Seahawks, who, like last season, just had humongous dominant seasons. Not saying it's a season-to-season basis, but
that's 4 losses right there.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about 4 losses right there, and if you're not in your game, you're a 6-10 team, really easy. And I'm not a fan of, just me, and I'm not knocking anybody's ideas. I'm not a fan of knocking anybody down to the OMFL 2 out of the OMFL, just because I feel like, especially now, I do think there are circumstances, kind of like we were talking about earlier about people being engaged. If you're not trying, if you're just kind of going through the motions and your team's half-assed the whole time, and you're going 2-14 every season, I can see that. I can see, there's guys that would, just go crazy right now to have a team in the OMFL. I think that if you don't, if you're in that situation, you don't care. That's why I say it's a team-to-team basis. You're talking about DBL is going through a lot in real life, and his team on the field hasn't played real well, but he's passionate about his team. He does go through the last couple of weeks. He's been really engaged in, trade talks, talking about the games, and that's a different situation to me. But if you have somebody that comes in, and we've seen owners come in that just the excitement wears off real quick, especially when they get hit in the mouth by the Seahawks and Bengals or somebody like that real fast, and the new wears off and they kind of wear off for a season or 2, and they just kind of, just bottom out. We've seen those teams. I can see that. I can honestly see that, especially that season 2, you tell them, man, we got to do something, or, you're just, a dead log. I mean, pretty much you're just there. But I think it's a person-to-person basis for that reason, just because I think some guys just, are never going to be as good on the sticks or some situations are just better. Like you talking about walking into, I'll say that about mine. The Falcons are a team ready built for the playoffs. When I get them, they're a 89, 90 overall team. When I get them compared to somebody, if you go to the, I can't think of nobody right offhand. I guess you could say the Browns. I know they got a lot of potential, but on the books, they're a low 80 overall team starting out. And Chaotix had a lot more work to do with the Browns than I did with the Falcons. And I just think it's a case-to-case basis. I would hate to ever kick somebody out of OMFL and put them on OMFL 2 because they had a couple bad seasons. Yeah, I could be way more open to the team switching thing, especially if the circumstances felt like you said, where if you had 2 teams that, 3 seasons, they were horrible for 3 seasons, you might flip-flop them and do that. And the only thing I worry about that is some guys, they really do not plan ahead at all. with their moves. I mean, I think we've seen a couple moves this season where guys have moved and they came into a cap situation or to a team situation that was just horrible, that the owner did not look a season or two ahead. And I think it's a basis to basis move, and I think it's something that would be interesting to look into. But I personally couldn't get behind sending anybody to the OMFL 2 just on the basis of having some bad seasons.
Yeah, I would say if the OMFL 2 was established for 5, 6, 7 years, right, and like we have a real established like commissioner and like its own like culture, like that would be a different conversation. But it's not. It's just this Madden old. Well, it started late last Madden and swapped commissioners because Maniac had to step away from Madden for a little bit. So yeah, I don't like that idea either, just because of that, right? Like I just think we would. I think you also don't have an established guys. Like there's not this massive pool of established guys who are itching to come up, right? Like we have guys who are working on gameplay issues, working on like I haven't seen an article for OMFL 2 since Maniac left, right? Like so you don't have guys producing content like super engaged, like super great gameplay. So it's not like we have this big pool to pull from. I like the concept. I just don't think it works in reality. I've already said the reason why I haven't implemented this idea. The two quick things I'll say is, number one, if we ever make a move and do something similar to this, it will be my call, will not be a board vote. I will take everybody's input and I will make a decision because at the end of the day, this decision needs to rely on me. And the other thing is you just said some stuff that I will have to chew on. I've never really chewed on this. It's just been an idea that's been in the back of my head, but I always talk myself out of it because of all the reasons I've already stated. But to say, if it ever came down to something like 3 losing consecutive seasons, no team content, like no incentive plan winning, no engagement, of taking your spot if I have a guy in OMFL2 who's producing content, who's engaged, right, who's got great gameplay, I could be open to saying, hey, I'm sorry, but because of your lack of engagement in 3 losing seasons, we're going to offer you a team in OMFL2 if you want it, because we got a guy that we're going to move up just to have the best engagement. I would be open to something like that. So yeah, I think it's definitely something to chew on and something I'll continue to chew on. Maybe it's something we do for Madden 19 as we move on to that later this summer. D-Wayne, you had a question that I'll answer first, and I'll let you do your input. You said, Nate, what do you think of some of the passing and receiving numbers are attributed to improved, maybe more focused passing schemes, or do you think that the defensive side of the football has become more watered down in the OMFL? My personal knee-jerk reaction is I think every Madden, as you progress, the offensive numbers explode, the defensive numbers get tougher for the overall general league population, because at the end of the day, we play a video game that can be figured out and that guys can get better at, that guys can get their timing better, and that guys can build better, right? And so just because everyone is better on offense and the game itself in real life and in the video game is set up to be an offensive game, those offensive numbers are going to explode. I've said this a zillion times. I think I will always think this way. It's not right, wrong, or indifferent. It's the way I think. I never have a problem with a receiver having great numbers. I just don't have a problem with halfbacks doing it. Have a problem with tight ends doing it. I think that's flawed. But in this game where you can match up cornerbacks, you can double team, like you can highlight, like there's just too many ways to try to stop a receiver. I'm never going to have a problem with a guy doing it within our rules. Now, if they're running freaking 10 verticals, like, if they're doing cheesy stuff, that's a different conversation, but we have rules against that stuff. If they're doing it within our rules, totally fine with it, especially the way that zones are overpowered, where cover 2 zone is abused in this league. Even though we have tons of rules and we've talked about it a zillion times, I still see it called 10 times in a 13-play drive, right? Like I see it too much, right? And so I have zero problem with it. I do think it is because guys have just figured out the game more and have become better with their timing. What do you think?
Well, like I said, I wasn't speaking in general, just on an individual basis, but I mean, you make a good point on that one. I was just looking in general. You have some really good defensive masterminds here. I look at somebody like Bill. Look at somebody like Pepper, who's always known as a defensive juggernaut. Mo, who is still a defensive juggernaut. Just looking at the offensive explosions we just had, and I think a lot of it is kind of like you said, guys figure out what works. Guys figure it out. how to build these guys, how to play and how to succeed when they're doing it. And I do think a lot of it attributes to you guys. So I repeatedly say it. Somebody like Mo and like Cincy, who are really good at reading the defense. I think that goes a long way too. If you can recognize what's going on real quick, if you're real quick minded, you can attack it the right way. Um, but I do think the defense. I will say this. I do think the defensive side is not the flashy side. I do think guys would way rather have a 300-yard passer and a 150-yard receiver than they would to have a 14-10 game where they didn't explode themselves, but their defense played real good. And like I said, my question in general wasn't attacking the way in general. I was just curious on your thoughts on the offense versus defense. And I just think in general, in my opinion, I think that the defense is just not flashy. I think that to be a good defensive team is not a flashy thing. Unless you're like Mo, when you average 40 points a game and you only give up 10. I had to do that, Mo. I'm sorry. But, that's just an example. I was just curious to what you thought about that. Like I said, in my opinion, I just don't think the defense is as flashy. And I also think, like you said, you made a good point when you say the guys just figured out. They've got their schemes in place. They know how to attack you and to get in your soft spots on defense. And I think you made another good point about the cover two. Is the cover two, in my opinion, can be beat a few different ways. But cover two, especially with any kind of pass rush at all, is really overpowered. And I think guys really rely on it too much, especially in the red zone. And I think that's just because the few soft spots you have on that cover two defense are covered up when you're inside the 10-yard line just because the gaps aren't there. Especially the one I see all the time is the cover two invert. I don't know if you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's a very, very, very overused
8 in the box
defense. Yes.
8, which is abused. This season, 8 in the box has been so abused by so many teams. It infuriates me.
There's a guy who likes to run the ball. I don't like seeing 8 people in the box either.
It forces your hand. If you're a guy like me who can't run it like you can, it forces you to pass. It just does. Like if you already struggle with running the ball, they put 8 in the box. It's impossible. You just cannot do it. And now I'm forced to pass, and it just again. I'm going off on a rant that has. We got to wrap this show up in the next 5 minutes or so. Still have another question to go, but it infuriates me because it just forces your hand to do something, and then that's not fun. Like I don't want to play this game where I'm forced to do the same thing all game to beat you. It's against everything that we stand for as a league, and I get that some. Yeah, I'm going off on a rant here. Like it's just we'll put that on the next show. I think it's just super abused.
Okay, like I said, I agree with you there. We'll go ahead and go to the next question.
Let's stay there. Let's stay with the running back. So Bill says this. He says, will the OMFL consider putting restrictions around the number of times wide receivers can be targeted, number of catches, similar to the 70-30 rule? And that's actually an 80-20 rule, my buddy, that we have for running back carries. The numbers of some of the receivers are putting up are straight ridiculous. I will say this to answer the question bluntly. Yeah, we'll consider it. Just put it up in the owner's suggestion at the end of every season. We consider every owner's suggestion. Will we ever do it? I can tell you how I'll vote, and I'll probably always vote, and the answer will be no from me. But when it comes to those types of things, we have a board and we all vote. And if the board as a whole feels like it's a smart decision, we will do it. I've never made this all about me unless it's something like super important, like we talked about earlier about booting owners and stuff. Like that's a decision that needs to be for me only. But something like this, I will tell you how I will always vote and no. And I've given my reasons. A receiver is supposed to catch the ball. And as long as they're not doing something cheesy and using a game flaw to catch the ball and to get open all the time, and they're mixing up their routes. Look, guys are like, well, I've seen that route a ton of times. Look, we only get drags, crossing routes, posts, comeback routes, out routes, like and the whatever they call it, that C route, that flag route, whatever you want to call it, right? There's only 6 or 7 routes in the whole game. Like at the end of the day, there's only so many routes you can choose from and so many combinations you can choose from. If he is a starting receiver, he's not a slot receiver, he's not a tight end, he's not a halfback, I will never have a problem with a guy using their number one receiver like a number one receiver. You never see a guy in this league have 150 catches, 200 catches, like some stupid number that we would never see in real life. If you have a Jerry Rice, if you have a Randy Moss, then use that guy And as the defense, you need to adjust. You need to play that linebacker to help cover, play that cornerback, play that safety to help cover. You need a double team. You need to highlight. Like, you need to figure out what it needs to take. Or at the end of the day, you may just not have a guy to be able to cover him, and you need to stop everything else, right? Like there comes a point where you need a game plan and you need to figure out what you have to do to win those games. I can't stop the Atlanta Falcons run game. I've even changed my defense. Like I play a 4-3 now. I've done everything and I can't stop it. That doesn't mean that Dwayne's being cheesy because he's got these massive holes. It just means he has a better team, he has a better scheme, he's a better player, and I got to figure it out, right? Like at some point, yes, I know where this is aimed. This is aimed at the Bengals. This is aimed at the Seahawks. This is aimed at, especially the Seahawks. Like, I love you, Mo, but you know this is aimed at you, right? Like, you put up 2 back-to-back OMFL Player of the Years with your rookie receiver, and you're doing it again with a brand new rookie receiver. He is just good at it, right? And yes, he has built his team really, really well. I think it's on our job to adjust. This guy's not playing the slot. He's not a tight end. He's not a halfback. I personally, again, have no problem with it. Do I get why people are frustrated? Do I get why people are, like, questioning? I questioned when I look at it. I was like, hey, bro, is this a slot guy? Like, what are you doing? Like, again, I question, but I think we just have too many great things set up to be able to hone some of that stuff, and I'm not going to just start creating rules because the guys are within our rules, which I think are fair, being really, really good players.
Yeah, I think we'll go back to what Bill said. You know, I'm all for 70-30 rule. I love sharing the ball, running the ball. I should say that, Bill. I'm with you on that one. I'm glad you premeditated that rule.
It's 80-20, though.
Yeah, it is 80-20. Now, I am one. I really love to share the ball between my 2 running backs. So 70-30 would not hurt my feelings, Bill. I think it's a tough one. I think, you know, it's a whole different situation. You're talking about trying to make a ratio for receivers than he is running backs, because a running back, you have a choice every time you snap the ball who you're going to give it to. And as a receiver going out for routes, you don't know which one is going to be open, honestly. And I do think, you know, we had this conversation with Malik Cheek, if you remember, from the Vikings.
Yep.
When he dominated because he was the number 3 receiver playing out of the slot, which means that number 3 cornerback or, you know, a safety or somebody of that nature was guarding him. And I think that itself creates matchup problems. But, you know, speaking to somebody like Mo's case, where you have your number 1, number 2 receiver, you're running most of your – and I'll say that against Mo, and it was the most frustrating part of playing Mo was Mo can run his best passing out of 2 running backs, 2 tight ends, and a running back, 2 tight ends, and 2 receivers, or any formation of what we call a base formation, is he can run majority of his pass plays out of that one. And I think it is frustrating. And with that being said, I don't know, and I've even told people that I didn't know if there's a way that you could even monitor it if you wanted to, because with that being said, towards the end of the game when you're trying to make key plays, you're going to throw it to the open receiver. And when I say that is you're 1 and 2 guy, and as a guy who I throw to my number 1 receiver quite a bit. My number 1 receiver is nowhere near a lot of these other number 1 receivers, but my number 1 receiver is probably going to catch 40% of the balls. I think it's something that could be looked at, but I think it's something that would be very, very hard to regulate. And I think it's something that you're putting on other players to – Nate, you as a person who hates the insta shed and the guys getting in the backfield, just think about if you had to drop back and then think about how many catches your receivers have drop back. And you know, I'm one, and I do.
You don't set guys up for success that way.
No, I think you make it more of a thinking game then. And if somebody is frustrated, and Mo knows I love him. And me and Mo play outside of Madden. We play Rocket League and stuff together. It is frustrating playing Mo with Kesey and Jacko. You got 2 guys who could be a number 1 receiver on any team in the league on the same team out there on the field at the same time. And it's impossible to cover both of them. You really have to – I mean, but that's not – I guess it's – in my opinion, it's hard to punish Mo for building his team that way. And
Deco was like a 5th round pick, 4th round pick. Everybody had 4 rounds to draft the kid.
And I would love to see more disparity. I would, but if I had 2 receivers that could catch everything, I probably would never throw to my 3rd guy either. But like I said, I think it's something that I think it could be discussed. If like you said, we're up for discussion or anything. Doesn't mean anything will happen, but we can discuss it. And I do think it's something that could be discussed. I think um, it's just something that is going to be really it's going to be really hard to come down to um, a good. I don't know of a way, honestly, and I'm not the smartest cookie in the box here, but I don't know of a way you could regulate that, honestly.
It just becomes more that we have to police and more like I just refuse to have so many rules where guys have to play with a printout. Like that's just stupid. That's not fun. This is not a job. This is supposed to be fun. So there is that balance between having competitive advantage and fair play rules and then making this fun at the end of the day. So that's what we're trying to do. We got to put a bow on this show, man. The wife's giving me the stank eye, and we went over an hour or so. Man, thanks for all these great owner-submitted questions. Dwayne, you pushed through, my buddy. Like, I appreciate you so much. I know that you hate me when I beat you, and I definitely hate you when you beat me, but I get over it pretty quickly. I just appreciate you. Hopefully we'll get Dawson back on here pretty soon. But it's been a great show, a lot for us to chew on. Some free points for anybody that wants to get a question up there about 8 in the box. There you go. Some free points and definitely a rant that I'll go off on. But it's been a great show. Until next week, we'll see you guys. Peace.
Later, guys.